That is a true story. He did put a whole load of frogs in Ayrton's bed.
It was the whole night we put out all these frogs, and now I'm back in the room and I say, and where did you find the snack? So I got the telephone call from Bernie, and Bernie says to me, what did you do with Eddie? Eddie is sitting in front of my office. What did you do with him?
I told you it was a bad idea to have him on here.
For me, Ayrton was the best race driver I ever saw. But today I have to say is Max Verstappen. This is another guy, the same level.
Hello and welcome to Formula for Success in association with F1 Manager 2023. I'm David Coulthard, and with me as always is the mad Irishman, Eddie Jordan.
Yes, it's me, and we've got a real special guest for you this week. What's wrong with you?
The look on our special guest's face when you go, "Arr." Maybe we get our special guest to say a few words and then see if our listeners recognize his voice.
I got afraid now. I think I'm leaving.
Is he confused already?
No, but I'm sitting here.
Why did you never drive for me? Ladies and gentlemen, none other than Gerhard Berger, the madman from Austria.
He is indeed. I will just give you some stats for our listeners who weren't watching Formula One back when Eddie and I were competing, but he raced for 14 seasons in Formula One. He started 210 races, had 48 podium finishes, and 10 victories. As you said, it's Gerhard Berger, and it's a pleasure to have you in the room. I'm sorry I had to bring Eddie, because as you know, he's a liability, and he's probably going to make up some lies, and you have to deny them.
No, that's not true.
It's good that you didn't tell me before that you bring Eddie, otherwise I wouldn't come here.
Well, I could be your savior. Don't write me off. Don't write me off just yet.
It's a deal. Okay.
So I'm going back. Can I go back in time?
You can do anything. It's your podcast.
Because you asked each other, when did you first meet each other? And I'm thinking back, and I said, well, there was Tommy Byrne, and we'll talk about him in a second, because he was crazy. So 1982-83, I remember he was driving for Trevolato in Formula 3, but he did one race with Helmut Marko, I think, as a separate race, which was the Austrian Grand Prix. We did it also. Marty Brundle won it. Gerhard was second. Alan Berg, I think, was third. Is that not right?
No,
Oh.
I don't think so.
That's not right.
I think I was somewhere in the midfield.
Did you never drive for Helmut?
No, that's when I started for Helmut, but I remember I had some problems. A couple of weeks before, there was the European Championship race, and that was very competitive. But then we came to this Formula One race, and I still remember, because it still hurts, I was thinking it's going to be the same game than before in the European Championship race. I'm going to win it. And then the whole weekend went a little bit wrong, and you won it. Yeah, you won it. No, you didn't. Martin did.
Marty Brundle won the race.
So that's when you would first know each other.
That's 40 years ago, remember.
Can you remember Eddie at that time, or when was the first time you remember meeting him?
Yes, I remember similar than Eddie, and I remember on the way home you had a bad accident, and you called me, and you need some help in Austria because one of your trucks had a terrible accident, and that's when we get more close.
Well, it's always in the face of adversity, things like that, you know who you can... And I did call Gerhard, and tragically, Marty's number one mechanic, Rob Bowden, lost his life. Tragically, the truck went over a cliff, if you like, the mountains in... We did a silly thing, I think. We decided instead of going the motorway, we would be able to shortcut by going over some of the mountains. And these accidents do happen, but... Tragic loss of life, and actually, in many ways, the people of Austria were sensational because the police and everything, they made it easy for us to be able to try and leave and go, and that happened. And I just must add to that, please, because Martin Brundle was driving the next Sunday in Thruxton, but we'd no car. And there was a guy called Tim Clues, great insurance broker, and a couple of other people came together, went down to Ralt factory, and they built a car, and we raced against Senna the following Sunday. But the hospitality and the real well-wishers in Austria was sensational. But then Austria and Ireland are kind of very similar types of countries. We've got big brothers on top of us, and there was a bit of a relationship, and they were fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear of the loss of the mechanic and that, but as you say, out of adversity, that's when you discover who your friends are.
Well, you know, and I know it's 40 years ago, and you often think, well, how long do I really know him? But I think we've never had a crossword in our lives ever since. We've crossed swords many different times because he had different teams. But just like you were both very lucky. You avoided driving for Jordan in one respect or another. But anyway, we won't talk about that.
No, well, actually, I'm curious to know, because we're going to get into your career and understand your journey from touring cars into Formula One, actually. So it's a slightly different route. But did you ever get approached by Eddie to drive for him in Formula One? And if so, did you say, I'm not driving for that joker?
Honestly, I don't remember, but anyway, it was a no-go for him and for me, because we both was just behind the money, and so it wouldn't work out. It always one has to pay and one has to receive.
He's unlike you. We know you're after the money.
It's no way. It's a banker. I learned then he was a banker, so it was very clear. No way. Eddie.
It wouldn't have worked.
Everything for me.
Yeah, I was trying to remember when the first time we would have met, and it would have been, of course, when I came to Formula One. But a standout memory for me was when I was in my first full year in '95, because I did 8 races in '94. But I remember you and the other Austrians organised. When I say the other Austrians, I mean the late great Niki Lauda. And Bernie's motorhome, I'm sorry, his name's gone out of my... Heinz, Karl Heinz, who ran the Bernie's motorhome. You pulled me in and persuaded me that it was tradition in Monza before qualifying to have a schnapps. And I was a young, impressionable driver, and you were a Grand Prix winner. Really? Absolutely. And you got Nicky there and Karl Heinz. And of course, you guys had set this up. And I didn't want to say no. So they bring out 3 little glasses that look like schnapps. For sure, they were drinking water. They gave me a schnapps. This is about half an hour before qualifying. I take the schnapps. I go out. I'm on pole position. I got pole.
David, I always drank before qualifying a Ramazzotti and an espresso. Really? Always, yeah.
And then you were on top of the world.
First I was sleeping, then a Ramazzotti and an Amber, and then espresso. That's
so now we have to go back in time.
How I got into shape.
This conversation will revolve around schnapps for the whole duration, because that was '95, David. I want to go back a couple of years. '93, I arrive in Japan. I hadn't got a driver, so I decided, Jesus, I better give Irvine the chance. I'd sent him out there to make some money for me in Formula 3000, and he'd been doing really well, so he got the drive. It's his first drive ever in Formula One. So Irvine, as we know, was a great talent and great fun. We won't talk about his fitness levels, but that's another story. But anyway, during the race, it was wet. And he knew the track in Japan, in Suzuka. And
Tough track, great track.
A really audacious maneuver to unlap himself against Senna. And Senna went on to win the championship that particular day. And of course, they got absolutely hammered with Karl Heinz, with him. Gerhard was feeding him with schnapps. And at this stage, Senna, who was really a teetotaler, but he was off his head on whatever he had given him. And he sent him, he said, I wouldn't put up with what Irvine did. You better go down and see that Irvine and teach him a few lessons and tell him, do you not realize I am the world champion? And that's it.
Is that your Austrian impersonation of Gerhard?
But anyway, Irvine came down. What happened then?
It was a bit similar, as you said. After the race, Ayrton tried to overtake Eddie, what was overlapped, and it was very difficult. It made him the life very difficult, and in the end he said, well, if somebody wants to overtake me, doesn't matter if it's overlapping or not, then he has to do it. It's so, yeah. But anyway, we was with Karl Heinz and with Ayrton, and we talked about it, and Ayrton was so upset. And we gave him one schnapp, we gave him the next schnapps, we gave him the next schnapps. And he started again to complain about. And I said, why you just don't go out and beat him and stop to talk about it? We gave him another schnapps, he went out and tried to beat him.
There was a picture of them fighting in the back of the garage.
He's doing an interview, and because we were a small team, we were given these tiny little huts to have our hospitality in. And in walks Senna. And I'm saying, Jesus, the world champion is just coming in here to say well done to Eddie for finishing 6th. You know, his first world championship point in his very first race. Not many people had done that. And the next thing, boom, he punches him. And Irvine just went back. He says, "That's the best publicity I'll ever get in my entire life." And that's how
So it was a win-win situation.
it was on the front page of every paper.
I'm very conscious of the fact that we have your time for this particular podcast. If we were actually to go through the timeline of your career and all of the things that you've lived through, we'd need to do like a series. We'd need to do 7 or 8 shows, because you've teammated with one of the great champions who, in his lifetime, credited you with teaching him how to have fun, and you credited him with giving you a few driving tips. But we have to talk about your relationship with Ayrton. Then we need to obviously talk about the fun and games you used to get up with. But let's start, first of all. Ayrton was someone that I worked very briefly with as a test driver. I cherish the fact I have an overlay of me driving the Williams around Estoril, and on the same day that he was driving the Williams, because it gave me a direct comparison with an unbelievable driver, someone that was able to exploit single lap performance in an incredible way. So, share with us your experience being a teammate and a friend to Ayrton.
Well, I think we three know very well the Ayrton as a person, especially Eddie. Eddie had to fight with Martin for many years in Formula 3 against him, so he knows him in and out. And he was just a very, very special personality. He was a very special driver. Unbelievable commitment. I learned over my time, impossible to beat. But I have to say, I was a bit naive. We've been the same age. We came in the same time into Formula 1. Him a half year earlier, me later. We know each other already from Formula 3, and then we start to compete in Formula 1. I was in Ferrari, he was in Lotus. And I had a good setting in Ferrari, good car, good engineer, and I was competing with him the whole time and winning races. And I underestimated how good he really was. I thought it's similar to many other of my teammates. It's just going to be another one to beat. And that's why I decided to go from Ferrari to McLaren. I didn't care about Ayrton or no Ayrton. I just saw myself. And when I entered, it was funny. It was the first race in Phoenix. And he was already a little bit the king of the rain. And the first day was raining. And I was on ball. That was still Friday when we went for ball. I was on ball. So second day dry, Gerhard was again on ball. So I said, okay, it's just another one. Then in the race, I had some problems with the pedals and I crashed. But anyway, he went back to Brazil, thought about it, come back, and I never beat him anymore. No, and then he really showed me what it means to have talent, to have professional approach, to have a street cleverness of Sao Paulo, to have a very, very high level of concentration. I studied him for the first year when I was in McLaren, and then the second year, maybe after a couple of months, I just thought, impossible to beat this guy. And just one funny thing, when I left Ferrari, I had a very good engineer, Giorgio Ascanelli, young engineer in Ferrari, and I worked extremely well with him. He looked to my face and he knows what the car needs. But I thought it's normal, so I thought I am so good. But he was a big part of my success, He made the setup of my car just right. So anyway, when I came to McLaren, was different engineers. Ascanelli was new generation. He was the first guy with the computer at the time, with data and so on. This was a bit more the old-fashioned style, where you as driver tell, okay, car is doing this and this. So anyway, it was difficult. At one stage, I said, I need this Ascanelli if I want to compete with Ayrton. So I went to Ron Dennis, and I said, Ron Dennis, there's this young guy in Ferrari. We need him. After a couple of conversations, stayed quiet. One day, Ron called me and they said, Gerhard, I have good news and I have bad news. What would you like to hear new first? I say, let me know the good news. He said, Ascanelli is coming, the engineer. Great, fantastic. I say, what is the bad news? He says, he's going to work with Senna.
Why? Why did he do that?
Ayrton already did his homework in the back, and so it just was so in some ways funny, in some ways nice, because they all been always great. McLaren, Ron, always been great when I worked for them. And Miss Senna had a very, very good relationship. But when it comes to killing instinct, you know.
That's him.
That's him, nothing else.
But he was the same we talked about Formula 3 and Marty, and even then, before that, he would spend all night, every night, in the garage, and the lights would be always last off because there was nothing. He wanted to see every single item on the car. But I want to change the subject. We're talking about technical widgets and stuff like that. I don't want to talk about that. What made you think, by putting in his room, in his bed, you filled his bed with a whole lot of frogs? Now, people might find that very bizarre, but what on earth was going through your head that you would do such a thing?
You put frogs in his room?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know.
You put frogs. First of all, his case, you dropped it out of the helicopter going over Lake Como. Just there. I remember. Yeah. Because he said it was indestructible. He said it was made out of carbon. And you said, well, let's see about that. And you opened the door and you
that was negotiation time with McLaren. And Ayrton spoke every day about his bloody new contract, what is not signed yet. And it's so difficult, and it's, again, a discussion. And we was living in the Villa d'Este. And one day in the morning, we met in front of the helicopter, him with his briefcase, and he showed me the briefcase and said, the contract is done, it's in. We said, great, I don't want to hear the story again, it's finally got, thanks God it's done. So we sit in the back, Lisa and myself, wife of Ron Dennis, and Ayrton flying the helicopter in front with the pilot. Mr. Important put the headset on, everything, and I had the briefcase under my knees. And we flew in here, and I was a bit bored anyway. And we was just crossing the circuit on top of the tower, you know. And I saw the bloody briefcase with the new McLaren contract, so I opened slowly the door. I put the briefcase and I put it out and I closed the door again. so then we watched. Lisa was in the back. She couldn't believe, you know. So we watched down the thing fall down. We was about, I don't know, it was about 150 meters high. So we landed the helicopter there. And we walked out from the helicopter. I jumped out from the helicopter, and Ayrton went to the back to pick up his briefcase, and he didn't find his briefcase. He looked, and then we saw from far a marshal coming with his briefcase in the hand. So he looked, but he was very switched on. At one stage, he looked at me and said, "You didn't do her." So, yes, it flew out of the helicopter.
Did he see the funny side, or was he pissed off?
No. He know there was no limit at this time, you know.
Well, why did you do that? Because it's not just the only thing that you did to a teammate.
You know, should I tell you? I think these days, I don't see the guys are funny like we been whatever, but it's so transparent everything now that at this stage you could basically do anything. Yeah, I mean, you're not driving racing cars or Formula 1 if you're not a little bit crazy. And this goes through all your life. And we've been also, when we've been joking, maybe the limit was sometimes a little bit different. But today, with all the transparency, with all this new technologies, it's impossible to do. You cannot. So at our time, we did, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of laugh, and it was super.
No, it was a major laugh, and we'll come on to some of those. But we've just had somebody last week on, your old teammate, Jean Alesi. And of course, Jean has very fond memories of his time with you, but nevertheless, he has one or two issues with you. And we're trying to go through what was going through your head when you decided to tear up his passport.
The what there?
You tore up his passport.
Oh, yeah, there was something.
You're losing your memory. You're losing your memory when you kind of think back.
He was on the way to Japan, and I didn't want that he goes to Japan. What was it? Yeah, we had...
you tore up his passport, and he waited for you. He was so angry.
I think maybe just a moustache or something.
No. You tore up his passport. For the people and the listeners out there, you want to realise what used to go on. You do not want to be a teammate of Gerhard Berger, because you take your life in your own hands in a different way. Nothing to do with racing, but it was real manic. He was a comedian and he just ran the route. No one ever was like you before. Do you realise that? You know, there was the James Hunson, there was you, maybe a little bit Irvine, all in different way, but they were absolutely all crazy guys. Why did you tear up his passport?
I tell you a better one of a passport. That was a small one, but I tell you a real good one of the passport.
Go on.
Yeah. So
Sorry, we have to tell the listeners. He waited for you in the car park.
Yeah, in Estoril. In Jerez.
He waited for you in the car
He crashed into my car.
and he waited till you were driving out of the car park and he aimed straight for you, first gear, and boom, straight into the side of your car, right? Correct?
Yeah, and that was payback time.
And then you...
Yeah, but I tell you another good one from the passport. Because now I remember, as you say, we had the last race of the season in Australia with McLaren, with Ayrton. And Ayrton already the whole weekend say, well, this race, and I am gone. I'm gone to Brazil. I come back again 1 week before the first race. You go testing. I say, anyway, we've been before the race in our settings, and like usual, I always looked a little bit in the Playboy. He read the Bible, and then he left the motorhome, and I saw his briefcase open, and I look, and there was 2 passports in, one diplomat passport and a normal passport. So I looked. I put the pages out with his photos on both passports, and I had this Playboy with a girl with the open legs. I cut it out, and I taped it in and closed the passport and put it back to the briefcase. Anyway, after the race, he said, Gerhard, I'm gone to Brazil. I'm gone home. I give you a call in the winter. I said, okay, cool. Have a good flight. And a couple of days later, called me in Austria and he said, you're the biggest idiot I ever met. He said, you know, in Australia, I won the race. They just say, go out. But I had to stop in New Zealand and change plane in New Zealand. And they asked me for a passport. I put the passport in, and he opened. And here was this nice-looking girl looking out. And they put me nearly in jail. So anyway, he was very upset, and we go forwards, backwards, and it was all fine. But then the new season starts, and he was telling to a couple of journalists this story. And one journalist in Austria started to write this story. Anyway, one day I was home in Austria. Somebody knocked on the door. I opened. Was the police in front of the door? So they say to me, I say, Mr. Berger, we have to. I know them all around there, but they had half smile, half serious face. We have to ask you. We have to ask you some questions. You need to come with us to the police station. I thought I was too quick with the car somewhere, or I did something, whatever. And so I was going to the police station with them. And the police station, they sit me down, and they say, well, here we have a serious problem. You destroyed the passport. You are Austrian citizen. You destroyed the passport. And I say, but listen, I'm living in Monaco. The story is in Australia, and it's a Brazilian. He said, no. With an Austrian citizen, you cannot do something like this. This is a serious matter, and we need to. And a prosecutor is on it, and we need to make now a report on it and to see what's going on. I say, oh shit, you know, so I'm in troubles. Anyway, it was quite serious. So they start to put out the paper and start to write down what happened. And I say, well, but this is a story from the newspaper. And I say, it's not true. And they say, but it's written. I say, yeah, but it's written a lot of stuff, you know. I say, okay. So tell us, do you know about it? Yes, I hear about it. And this was the just after the finish in Suzuka with Prost. All the fight happened with Prost, with Senna. And they say, do you have any idea who was doing this? I say, yeah, I know. They say, who? Alain Prost. He puts in. So, but the story, you know, and then didn't end up so funny. It took 1 year to be able to get out of this one. But this was my story with the passport with Ayrton.
So you pushed it maybe a little bit too far in that particular case.
It's a serious thing I was underestimating. But
so have
anyway.
you ever had The misfortune to have some of these games played on you by Gerhard.
I don't think so. I think I managed to avoid Gerhard doing anything like that with me. But we have some things that, well, all of us, of course, have motor racing in common. But one thing we have in common is working for Ron Dennis. And Ron was a particular character. And you obviously know him very well as a team principal, Eddie. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Ron, because he didn't always, let's say, communicate well in the paddock with the journalists, but he liked to have good fun away from the track. And I'm sure when you were there with Ayrton, you had some nice dinners and nice parties. I know when I was there with Mika, we also had that situation. But you know, he was a lot softer in social than he was when he was at the track.
I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, we all know the good and the not so good side of Ron, but I have to say, when I worked for him, he always was great to me. He always supported me. It was not easy next to Ayrton, but he always supported me, included the team in a very good way. And, sorry Eddie, at the time I have to say he was the best.
I have no doubt about that. Look at the
you
results.
admire. You've said this in a previous podcast.
Okay, yeah.
He admired McLaren.
At the time, when he started to think about road cars and stuff, he wasn't concentrated anymore. But as long as he was focused on Formula One, he was the best.
I have absolutely only 100% support of what you've just said. And in actual fact, you know, one race, he said very many strange things. He used to say to me, even if I won a race, for example, he'd say, I was lucky there and I was lucky there. But on one occasion, when I did win it fair and square, he came to me and he said, you know, that's the first race you've won on merit. And I think he meant that because, you know, he meant it because the other ones were a bit fluky and a bit lucky, but then you've got to be lucky to win several races. But anyway, I want to go back in time because you haven't had the first-hand experience of having to work or to play games or do whatever. But I'm going to go back to a little story where I don't know why I needed to leave Japan to get back home in a reasonable fast time. Look, he's laughing already. Look, he's taking the piss out of me, big time. So we're on the plane, and I said to Bernie, any chance of jumping on with that plane of yours? And he said yes.
Eddie,
he said, we got Berger on the plane.
Eddie, you're mixing it up.
Am I mixing it up? Well, you tell us the story then. Tell us about what you did to me, you nasty bastard.
Yes, it's a pleasure to tell. It was really funny. David, it was really...
It wasn't funny at all. It was 2 weeks, 3 weeks of pure hell.
We had a plane together, Ron and myself, flying to Japan. On the way back, he came before the race. He came to me and said, Gerhard, would you mind if we take Eddie with us back? I said, no problem at all. Yeah, so he can come back with us. And that was the time when I wasn't racing. I was a motorsport director of BMW, and we supported the engines to BMW. And this was the big weekend of Eddie, presenting in Suzuka his new partner, Ford, engine supply, Ford. Now he's partner of this big company, Ford. He made his big press conference and so on and so on. Anyway, when I hear the story, I say, okay, no problem, Eddie can come back with us. And I went back to the motorhome, and I just thought, and I said to my guys, can you take a piece of paper and write on that we're going to supply next year to Minardi an engine, a BMW engine, free of charge. And it was a very good engine at the time, you know, free of charge and so on. And put it just in my briefcase. And they didn't understand what they're doing, but they did, so I put it in my briefcase. So after the race, we all ran to the airport, briefcase. So we went into the plane, everybody got his place. I put the briefcase in the middle, and I say to Ron, I go to the cockpit to the pilots, and you say to Eddie, come on, let's open the briefcase of Gerhard. Let's have a look what he has in. So anyway, I went to the cockpit.
Do you believe what's going on here?
Yeah. Take 20 minutes, walk back. I saw Ron already like this. You know? So Eddie he couldn't even see it anymore straight, you know. At one stage he said, Gerhard, what are you going to do next year with the engines of... You still have exclusivity with Williams? And I say, no, Eddie, next year maybe we're going to supply a second team. Did you think about us? I say, no, Eddie, you are with Ford, you just made a big point. No, don't worry. But, it's not important. Why, we could be the best team for you. Can you believe Mini is BMW and we Jordan, young and fun and so on. Yeah, but Eddie, you have a contract over there. Don't worry about it. We're going to sort everything out.
You've been busted. You've been busted.
Have I been busted?
You've been busted.
I told you it's a bad mistake to have him on here.
So I say, but Eddie, this is a fantastic idea, I would love to give you. We are just talking with Minardi, yeah? So he knows, of course, everything because he read my paper in the briefcase, So I tell you, for 12 hours,
Longer
flight.
than that.
Longer. He didn't sleep 1 second. He was just thinking all the time how he gonna put the thing further. And I start to do like I gonna sleep, Whenever I open one eye, I could see Eddie already and so on. So I say, okay, Eddie, I think we have to have a look deeper into it. I need to convince my board in BMW because now we have Minardi, but maybe I can talk with them. But I need all your numbers of your company. I need. Gerhard, we just have done a due diligence. I have all the numbers. I say, but Eddie, it's good. So you send me everything, then I can prepare my document for the board of BMW. So
Very evil you are.
So
very evil.
12 hours flight. You have no idea. And Ron was just sitting all over the corner. And before we went out, and the way when we were landing, I say to Eddie, Eddie, you send me tomorrow all your papers. And one thing, who is very influenced to all the boards is Bernie. You should have Bernie on your side. Maybe he can do a call and say, well, it's a good idea to give Eddie. I'm gonna contact Bernie again immediately. I don't worry about it. So anyway, when we left the plane, Ron puts me on the side and I say, we need to tell him, we cannot let him go like this, I said, no, don't worry, let him go. So anyway, we left. Until I was home, Eddie, I think I had about 25 missed calls on my telephone. Next day, I got 40 papers of all his numbers of the company.
Every spreadsheet that you could get your hands on was emailed.
Everything got. At one stage, the day after, I got a telephone call from Bernie. And Bernie says to me, what did you do with Eddie? Eddie is sitting in front of my office. I have to do all this deal now with McKenzie. I have no time. And he's talking about some shit. What did he do with him? So anyway, at one stage, we had to stop it. And then he came and said, Gerhard, you bastard, you write me immediately an email that you're not going to use my papers for anything wrong. It's very discreet and it's just, And they say, yeah, Eddie, and you write me an email that you never look in my briefcase anymore.
That is absolutely
anyone who thinks
brilliant.
I thought, don't worry.
Do you know that? No.
No, I never. This is the
my
first
God.
time. This is a world exclusive.
I told you it was a bad
on
idea
the
to have him on
fastest
here.
growing
It was
podcast.
It's,
We're
it was a
revealing
nightmare.
this. You are, Gerhard, absolutely brilliant to.
Should we not talk a little bit about racing? It looks like we have never
I've lived
raced.
through all of
Well,
that.
actually, let's bring it to a more serious note then. That's the fun, and
Really?
that's definitely...
Serious?
Yeah, because, look, Formula One is a serious business, and you've had a fairly unique career in that not only were you a driver, but you were a team owner as well with Toro Rosso in partnership with the late, great Dietrich Mateschitz. But before we get to that, I remember as a young driver aspiring to be in Formula One, watching all the Grand Prix, and you had a very fiery accident in Imola. Incredible, actually, that you were able to walk away from that. You had some burns on your hands and then came back to continue your career. For the listeners at home, put us in the cockpit. That was a big moment. You're in the flames, reminiscent of what Niki Lauda had happened to him at the Nürburgring, but thankfully your burns were restricted, I think, to your hands.
Well, first I have to say, when you talk about these jokes make us laugh and think, but because the other side of it was bloody dangerous at the time. I mean, when I see now all these test benches, all these tests, what is done before the parts go into the car, with all the calculations and so on, it's quite safe compared to this time. This time we've been the ones find out if the wing was strong enough on 300 Ks or it collapse or the brake disc explode or the tire goes or whatever it was. So how many accidents we all had all the time in practice, where you've been not on camera, where you don't talk, where you've been so close to lose your life. It was unbelievable. And that's maybe also a little bit the compensation. The laughing was a bit the compensation to the serious side of the business. And Imola was a little bit like this. I mean, was a new car, was second race or third race, and we have these chicanes in Imola where we take the curbs, and we had the front wing end plates nearly on the ground at the time. So of course the wing get a big bang a couple of times, and then I entered the straight, and just before Tamburello, the front wing broke. And I remember still well, and it's impressive what the body and the eyes do at a situation like this. It just went like a slow motion, you know. I was about 300 k's quick. I had about 200 kilos fuel in the back, and it was just straight on to a concrete wall. And I remember that I tried to steer, but the car was lifting in the front. And first moment I said it's a puncture in the rear. I looked in the mirror, no, I didn't see a puncture in the rear, and so on, until the wall was there, and I put my hands on the shoulders. And honestly, before I crashed into the wall, I say, no way to survive, because I was so fast with all this thing, and the car just exploded. And they measured about 120 kg in the impact. But I have to say, John Barnard at the time was a brilliant engineer, and the chassis was just saving my life. The chassis was unbelievable. The monocoque was so strong, so that it broke in the middle, it exploded, and so on. But in the end of the day, I burnt my hands, my back, I have broken a rib. But in general, it was nothing for this accident. And as you say, normally you don't walk away. But I tell you one thing now, because I think it fits to our story before to Ayrton. They put me into the hospital. I was in the hospital. Ayrton called me and said, how are you? I said, well, I'm okay. But Ayrton, I tell you, we need to see this wall has to be moved, because one day somebody gonna die there. And he says, yeah. I say, listen, let's get and see to get rid of this wall. And a couple of weeks later, we've been testing in Imola. We both went out from the car and walked to Tamburello and looked how we can remove this wall. And then we looked over the wall, and there's a river behind. And we both looked to each other and said, well, nothing really we can do. We didn't think about it to make a chicane. Nothing really we can do, you know. So we walked back, go into the car, and kept driving. And that was exactly the place where he lost his life. So that was the bad side.
Yeah, the bad side of the sport.
I think for our listeners, because what you've described during your day, where there was huge danger, and you offset that with having your element of fun and mixing the two together. And I'm just thinking, because most of us who recall those people, I was around to see James Hunt around the place. I had Eddie in the car, and I've known you a long time. You three guys stand out for me as being hugely quick drivers, hugely successful in terms of Grand Prix wins, but you had another side which was devil-may-care, or just crazy in lots of ways, but hugely professional in the car. Why do you think that there's no characters like that currently in Formula One?
I think it has to do something with the transparency, as I said before. All this social media, all these things, you know. I mean, you have some responsibility. Secondly, you have, that's another big issue. A big money came into the business, big companies came into the business, and they have an idea how they would want to present their company, how it should look. So there is no room for this kind of things. So suddenly you get, everybody has his press team, everything they say is controlled by a press department, everything is corrected. Suddenly things are just completely different than our time, because now our time, journalist comes, you talk with him, and the team reads in the newspaper, or your company or your sponsors read in the newspaper what you said. That's not anymore the case. So there's a couple of factors, but I think the biggest factor is the social media. I mean, simply, you cannot do this anymore.
You were a driver. You were a team owner. You ran the ITR, or you were the owner of ITR that is behind the German touring cars. there's always been an entrepreneurial side to your life. And I'm curious in two things, what the future holds for you in terms of business, anything you can share with our listeners. But also, I want to know, winning a Grand Prix as a driver or winning a Grand Prix as a co-owner of Toro Rosso, as it was at that time, what gave you more emotion?
David, there's nothing better than to be a driver. I mean, it's, of course, you're running out of time. Of course, you have to stop. But the nicest position in our sport, it's to be the driver. It's fantastic. And when you are lucky and you be a driver for a team where you can win races, as example, when you are driver of Ferrari and you win Monza, then this is something stays forever.
Which you did. You won here.
Yeah, I won here, and I'm shocked. I won here 35 years ago, but I won here after Enzo Ferrari died, and
you won here, David, didn't you?
I won here in '97.
Actually,
but I was driving for McLaren. It wasn't so popular as being a Ferrari driver.
Yeah,
well, you say that.
It's like McLaren win Silverstone.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the same thing. Sorry, I must just say, because we were an Irish team, and because the Tifosi Ferrari were not going very well at the time that Frentzen won here in '99. Honestly, we had so much support from the Italians because our flag is very similar to the Italian flag, but as long as we weren't English and as long as we beat McLaren, because they were the people who were leading the race initially with Häkkinen. So I think we've got one common thread there, which was a huge moment for me. I thought winning here was very emotional, I have to say. I think something about Monza is very special. It's hard to describe, but the passion that comes out of Monza is something I'm sure we've all felt.
We've been speaking on previous episodes about the difficulties Ferrari are having, and they had a really good car last year and things slipped away. This year the car doesn't seem to be as good, and it's kind of painful to see them not getting the results because Ferrari are the biggest name in Formula One. How do you see their current plight, and what would you do if they called you up and said, Gerhard, we want you to be involved in the team? Would you consider it, or are you're done with Formula One?
No, to answer this, clearly no. I'm 64. I'm done. I'm super happy, but I won't take the time for myself, and I would be not prepared to go 24 races flying around. No, but I have to say, we all love Ferrari, and I think for the sport it's very important that Ferrari is part of the championship run. It's a very, very important thing, but obviously, as Formula One, there is no kind of balance of performance or whatever. It's get your car right, get your team right, and then if you win, everybody gonna be behind you. But we all would like to see Ferrari a little bit more competitive than it is. But I have to say, I spent 2 periods in Ferrari. I went 6 years to Ferrari, 3 years, then I went 3 years to McLaren, then I went 3 years to Ferrari back again. And I experienced always the Ferrari as we see it now. Good, but just not that good. And yeah, it's a very, very difficult thing to be super competitive in Formula One and to win championships. If you want to compete, or if you want to beat Red Bull at the moment with Max Verstappen in the car, difficult to have the answer what they have to do.
He mentioned something there a few seconds ago I'd like to just touch on, and you said 64. Is that your age? Well, that was a very, very special 64. When I'm 64 was the Beatles. And we often talk about our love affair and affection for George Harrison. And I know you in particular. I remember going to a party with you, me, George, Barry Sheen, and a couple of others people. Was that Adelaide or something like that? And we had some great parties. You made that kind of thing happen because we'd all get probably inebriated in some form or other, but yet we'd be up early in the following morning to race. And I want to touch back on the Beatles and your connection with George. You found him an amazing guy.
Yeah, it was a great time with George. Unfortunately, he passed away too early, but don't ask me how this friendship came. You know, we met each other, of course.
He knew you were mad, and that's probably why. He had that in him as well.
Don't forget, there was a third mate, one was Barry. Barry Sheen was one of my...
No, Barry was a lunatic, I mentioned him.
And it was always George, Berger, and myself. And it was a fantastic group, you know. George couldn't just believe what he saw sometimes with Berger and me, because he couldn't believe what was going on.
I was there to witness some of the occasions.
And I was sure that he enjoyed this very much. But anyway, I think I met him first time in Brenzhage, 1984. And he slowly just built up a very good friendship. And he kept until his end. And was also a very, very nice thing, you know. George lived in my house, I think, I don't remember, and it was 2 months or something like this in Austria, up in the mountain, the time when they was looking for him in Los Angeles, in the end of his life, pretty late. And he was up, sitting on the terrace, and watching the farmers cutting the grass, you know. So he was two months living there, and our families had a good relationship. Was Tani with my daughter Christina, was Olivia and Anna. So it was a nice time to spend together. But to be honest, I just realized later or now what it means to have a George Harrison as a friend, because at the time I was just busy with myself the whole time, and it was very special.
He was also a
very special,
extraordinary, special person.
Very
he had
clever.
time for everybody. I mean, people think about the Beatles. Anyway, we pass. I have one other question, if I may, and that is because
just one thing. I would like to say one more about Barry. That was another great guy in our sport.
Yeah, but he was on 2 wheels, but he was completely deranged of anything sensible. He was a complete head case. But you and him was like litmus. You just light them up and off you go. You were two absolute lunatics.
For those listeners who had the privilege to see Barry race or to see him after his career, he was a character.
Number 7. Yeah. That was always his
I remember his last time he rode a bike. He was at Goodwood, and we've all been to Goodwood, the revival, a fantastic event. Lord March hosts that. But I remember Barry was in advanced stages of his cancer, and he was taking alternative treatment. And he came to me and said that, you know, one good thing about being ill is I get a lot of sympathy from the ladies, even to the end.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to go back to something motor racing, because now that we've got him, I think it's important for the listeners to have a real opinion of somebody who actually raced with them. And I'm thinking about Ayrton. I'm thinking about Mansell, thinking about Prost, and I'm thinking about Michael Schumacher. And I'm not asking for a 1, 2, 3, 4, but could you give me, was there anyone that's actually stood out? Because I'd like to hear your opinion.
Well, you know, I'm asked this question more or less all the time, but for me, Ayrton was the best race driver I ever saw in the period I was close to racing. But it's nearly 50 years now. And the guy was just another level, I have to say. I was in the team with Mansell. I know that the guys quite well, but Ayrton was another level. The only guy I felt for a while came close was Luis, on the sportive side, because he was extremely good too to reading races and so on. But today I have to say is Max Verstappen. Max, it's really now where I not have to think about it. This is another guy, the same level.
Higher, perhaps?
Huh?
Higher level, perhaps? I mean, he could go on to win more than 7 world titles, couldn't he? If he's lucky and he stays safe.
If Ayrton would not die at this race, and if he would have, you remember the car, I mean, he would be maybe 7, 8, 9 times champion. He would win the races after Williams won all the races. Can you believe Ayrton in the car? He would be just unbeatable. But I have to say, I watch Max now quite careful, and you know, it's again a new generation of race driver. He had unbelievable karting career. He learned racing from the very beginning in karting very well. And a funny story, I've been on a karting place the other day, and there was a guy next to me drinking an espresso, and then he started to talk with me, and after a while he says, you know, I've been the mechanic of Max Verstappen for 10 years in karting. I said, yeah, I was with Jos, with his father, for 10 years we together, and he showed me all the photos, yeah? So I started to talk with him, and he says, Gerd, we've been karting every day in the year, all year. Never school, never thing, we went just karting. When the freeze came, he at least went school in the morning and came then to the karting track. Max was just karting for 10 years all the time. And you can see, I mean, the guy is just the way how he sees everything. And the other thing is, he loves this simulator, these races, sim races, yeah? And you know, when you do these sim races from child on, parallel to the karting, you learn all the different things already. On the start, first corner, outside, inside, whatever, you can practice so much more. And I feel that this guy has absorbed this all in very young years. And obviously he's a great talent too, but he's a very complete driver. And if he doesn't hurt himself, he will win a lot of championships.
I agree.
Well, look, Gerhard, as I suspected, we could continue talking for hours. You've been absolutely fantastic. I think that's a good place for us to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on. Listeners, you can get in touch with us and tell us who you'd like to invite on the show next week. You can say Gerhard again if we can get his time. You can email us at ffs@whisper.tv, or you can message us on social media at F1 for Success. We'll be back in a week. From Gerhard, myself, and the crazy Irishman, this was Formula
been a
1.
real
You still look good, huh?
Huh?
You still look good.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
He's well preserved.
Yeah.
We put him in vinegar.
I took my life a little bit, and actually, I'm coming back just before we finish, because
We're finished.
He lied to us. DC, he lied to us. Do you know that is a true story? He did put a whole load of frogs in Ayrton's bed, and you know what he said to him when Ayrton came to him? He said, did you not find the snake?
Yeah, he cleaned the whole room. When he was finished, I said, yeah, you know, it was the whole night we put out all these frogs, and now I'm back in the room, and I say, and where did you find the snake?
You really were a bastard
late
teammate.
listeners, I think we all need a rest after this conversation. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Nice to speak with you. I'm always happy to speak with the Britain side, and it's fantastic. You are Scottish. No, what?
Irish.
Irish.
I love it. He thinks you're so nice. You're Scottish.
Shut